what virtually everybody finds, including Elon Musk, is the real world is just really, really big and really, really messy.
The AI thing is so interesting, right? Because from a technology perspective, it feels like you can build products pretty immediately that are going to win.
Our entire way of doing everything as humans, we think is going to change. We reinvented the computer, and the new computer is far better than the one that we have been building on for the last 50 or so years.
The purpose of building the dominant venture brand was precisely to be able to have the companies be able to borrow that at the most critical points in their development so that the companies can kind of use our force in the world as a slingshot to basically build their own force.
You cannot join the firm unless you sign the culture document.
If you had to pick a thing, what are you compounding?
Reputation.
We have a very special guest, Packy McCormick, who just wrote an excellent profile of ASICS and Z. Packy, thanks for coming on the podcast.
Thanks for having me.
Packy, I want to start by saying thank you for the amazing piece. Like, it's just like incredible, like absolutely incredible. So we just like really appreciate all the work that you put into it, because that was a big one.
Thank you. I mean, I appreciate being able to tell the story. It's such a cool one, and I appreciate getting to work with you guys on it.
Everybody, welcome to the Ben and Marc Show, first of 2026, and we're now getting into how the media ecosystem has changed.
We talked about this great Tad Friend profile in the New Yorker in 2015 that I referenced in the piece that I wrote on A16Z this past week, saying that kind of kicked off, or was the last kind of point in an era where journalism cared about free speech. I think Marc will do a better job kind of summarizing what happened over the past decade. Now we're at the end of that point, and I was asking, to what extent Marc thinks that he and kind of a few people who stood up against this actually kind of shifted back to this anarchic or liberated view of the press or relationship with the media that we have now.
Yeah, and I was just saying, I think you could describe what's happening kind of going forward, the information environment being, you could use kind of three words. You could say uncontrolled, it's maybe the neutral word. You could say anarchic is the negative word. You could say liberated is the positive word. In terms of freedom of speech, freedom of thought, and I would say at least in the US, I think generally on the internet, and then, we can talk about what other countries are doing, but at least in the US, we're clearly entering a much more free speech world. So I should start by saying, like, I don't think I should claim any moral heroism at all here, at all, because I have my own version of my own story going all the way back to I turned down one of my claims to fame. I turned down the opportunity at the time in 1993 to implement censorship in the web browser, which would have been a completely different and very dystopian world. So I don't know, maybe I get a little bit of credit for that, but. I think for the last decade, like I was kind of on the same ride as everybody else, and I've been on the Facebook board since 2007, so I kind of went through the entire kind of crazy roller coaster that company went through over the last decade, and then we've been involved in lots of these companies. I was an angel investor in Twitter, angel investor in LinkedIn. They both became kind of key parts of the censorship machine at certain points, and so I don't want to claim like huge moral heroism. I do think a couple things. One is obviously Elon's purchase of Twitter, obviously was like a gigantic turning point. I also want to give just like enormous credit to the Substack guys. And they were very proud because we were the original investor and we're the largest outside investor in Substack. And I think they did a really, really great job holding the line on freedom of speech and I would tell you, under enormous pressure.
And
especially
took a very consistent and totally principled stand on it.
Yeah, that's right. And they got I don't know if people remember this or not, but I mean they got really lit up, by a lot of the sort of anti-speech forces for the whole litany of kind of standard accusations of just being absolutely horrible. They stuck to the principles the whole time, and then they at least with Elon, it acts like he's Elon, and so when he wants to go to war with somebody who's like trying to get him to censor more, like he does it in a very kind of public, visible, and forceful way. The Substack guy, Substack's still a younger company, and so they don't have that level of kind of just throw weight in the world yet, and so they have the harder version of the challenge, and they had to fight a whole bunch of fights, including fights that aren't even public, to basically keep the service with high integrity.
So I think a good place to kind of talk about a bunch of the themes that we covered in the piece. One of which is, the Substack investment. I remember at the time I was on Substack. My career was starting because of Substack, and I still at the time thought it was kind of a crazy investment. Were you thinking about it from the perspective of this is going to be a great returner? This is something that is good for the future. Is it a mix of the two of those things? And then to what extent have you allowed Substack to fight that fight by being on their side that they wouldn't have been able to do if you weren't there?
Yeah, so I'd say we never make we never make investments for just purely kind of social or political reasons. Like, so the goal obviously always is as sort of fiduciaries is to generate returns, and so in the main business, and so we always invest with the intention that the company that we invest in has the opportunity to become what we call kind of a cornerstone franchise in the industry and an important force in the world. And we certainly believe that at Substack at the time, and we believe that more than ever today. So I think that's true. But I also think I think this is kind of the magic in a lot of what we do in Silicon Valley, which is I think the companies in many, not in every case, but in many cases, the companies that become the best version of themselves also become the most successful businesses. And I think Substack is a great example of that. And Substack's actually a very, very, very good example of that, because if Substack is making its writers successful, then it's making itself successful, right? And so it's got this just like extremely direct alignment of interest between its success and its writers' success. And then as a consequence of that, if its writers are successful, kind of by definition, those writers' readers are successful. They're getting what they want. And so, I would say, there were sort of a bunch of reasons we invested in Substack. One was just, we fell in love with the guys. And you probably know the guys; they're easy to fall in love with. So that was the easy part. And then, look, I had been around. We had been around. The web going all the way back, and then, particularly the kind of golden age of blogging. Was kind of this kind of very special time. And blogging really, I think, maybe gets underestimated because maybe there was no single company that kind of got full credit for it or something. But, it really the phenomenon of blogging created an enormous amount of intellectual content, that basically was not going to exist otherwise. And then it just, blogging kind of just always had a series of problems because there was no single company behind it. But, one of the problems was it was just very hard for bloggers to make money. Right. And so, the Substack guys basically said, well, we're going to do that, but we solved the economic model. People are ready to pay now for content. And this makes sense. And then, there was this chicken and egg thing right up front, which was like, well, can you really see that, the internet's awash with content. People aren't paying for almost any of it. Like, are they really going to, you have to kind of squint and kind of say, okay, are people actually going to pay for any of the stuff that they're getting today? And I think the thing that in that case that we had faith in was basically this could be what we call a supply driven market. Which is right. If you provide the monetization capability, then you're going to bring into existence writers and content that don't exist today. And that is going to create new demand that's not visible today. And then that demand is going to come back around and is going to incent more writers and more content. And so it was basically a bet that there's like an entire generation of high quality content that doesn't exist because the monetization mechanism doesn't exist. And that's certainly what Chris and his partners believe. And I think that's absolutely what's proven out. And so, yeah, I think it's like a great example of founders that like really see a future that doesn't exist yet. And it's obvious to them. And unfortunately, in that case, they were able to, convince us. But like, whenever we really screw up, it's because there's a founder who can see the future. They come and they sit in our office, they tell us what the future is. And we say, yeah, I don't really buy it. Right. And then for the next 30 years, we have to read about the, glorious success of this thing as that future actually develops. And like, that really sucks. And I don't like to talk about those, but I will say, Substack is, maybe they're just really good at sales, but they fully convinced us. And I'm really thrilled that that's what's happening.
They were kind of ahead of the kind of change from old media to new media, and that, as the brand moved from the New York Times or the Wall Street Journal to the actual writers themselves, Substack was like a massive enabler for that. And, they created this thing, which they call the non-fungible writer, which is, like how many things in the newspaper could anybody write, and including AI, by the way. And, how much is like truly like interesting and valuable. And they really wanted all the truly interesting and valuable things to be able to build their people, to build their own brands and their own businesses on Substack. And that also turned out to be very true.
Yeah, and that was where Hamish in particular, right, turned out to be really critical on their team. And he and I had a conversation early on this where I was like, well, I don't know, are these people ever going to leave their publications? Are they ever going to actually write content that's when Substack was gearing up? It's when, in my view, the press kind of became this kind of extreme and negative monoculture. And so I was like, all right, you got because he's like, you got all these writers kind of trapped at these places, and I'm like, well, are they really trapped? Like, are they in jail, or have they built the jail? Like, what, if they leave, are they going to be any different? And he's like, look, if their only option to basically put food on the table is to work for a publication that basically requires them to write a certain way, then they're going to write that way, because they need to pay the bills. But he basically said, I guarantee you that there's a lot of these folks, where if they had an independent path, they would take, they would be thrilled to be able to, maybe break themselves out of jail. And they would be thrilled to, write about things, from different angles. and have different takes on things. And, you'd see this basically this liberation phenomenon take place, where you'd have actually many different kinds of voices, even coming from people where you wouldn't expect it based on the work that they did for, the New York Times or whoever. And of course, he was 100% right.
You can see a world where, because it attracts kind of all of the best writers from all of these different places who can build their own businesses, Substack becomes 10 times larger than any of the media organizations that it replaces. I love the email that you sent to Ali at Databricks, Ben, where you talk about the fact that, the business was underselling itself. He was underselling the business, and it was going to be 10 times bigger than Oracle, so $2 trillion. Yeah, I want to understand the mechanism of that. Do you think that happens every generation, that the new companies are 10 times bigger? Why does that happen? Is it just software?
Yeah, so on that one, it was actually pretty simple, because if you compared the on-premise software companies to the cloud software companies, so compare PeopleSoft to Workday, or compare Siebel Software to Salesforce, the cloud version was just 10 times bigger. And Oracle was kind of the on-premise version of Databricks, rough analog, things are different. Data is bigger, and so forth. But if you look at who was going to be the data kind of provider in the cloud, the provider of technology to manage your data in the cloud, it was going to, I was very confident Databricks would win that. And so then if you say, well, what's the market size of that? And by the way, when I said that AI wasn't as big as it is, so I think that that's helping my prediction. But it was just clearly going to be 10 times bigger. And I was like, Ali, why are you trying to convince this candidate that you're going to be worth $10 billion? That's what are you even talking about? But Ali is super paranoid. So, God bless him. So, those are kinds of things. And you have to know your entrepreneur. I think this is, one of the things that I think Marc does very well is that advice isn't advice you give to every entrepreneur. It's, it was worked well specifically for him. And I think that, that's always the case. It's a very psychological game running a company. And so you have to kind of tap in to that person's particular psychology to kind of change the trajectory of what the company is doing into the right direction.
Yeah, and I'd also add, Packy, on the Substack point, I think Substack could be 1,000 times the size of the existing content industry, whatever you want to call it, media news industry, the collective, kind of value. And the reason is because, and you're an example of this yourself. So, my whole life, so I'm in mid 50s. And so I grew up, when I was a kid and teenager, the moral panic of the era was television. And it was just this endless litany of sort of social criticism, from kind of, fancy people basically saying, consumers are, basically normal people are idiots. They just want to sit in front of the boob tube. They just want to be couch potatoes. The line everybody used at the time was Americans watch 6 hours of TV a day, and then you turned on TV and you just saw this. They have this term, the vast wasteland of game shows and bullshit. Yeah. And it was just this very dystopian kind of thing of just people are just morons. And then the internet version of that is, of course, is straight that kind of moral panic is transferred straight over onto the internet in the form of of course short form videos, TikTok. So people just want to watch these stupid short form videos, and it's just
playing the piano was the original one, right?
Yeah, exactly. Cat videos. By the way, I'm an aficionado of cat videos. I do not look down on cat videos whatsoever. AI cat videos are my current favorite genre of any form of entertainment. So I will.
The AI cat videos are very good.
I will. Yes, Ben can confirm. I send around a lot of AI cat videos. However, there is an enormous market for just mass media, just for whatever for whatever game shows or sitcoms or soap operas or their modern versions of those. And there's a giant mass media a market for cat videos, but. This goes back to this idea of supply-driven market. There's also, I think, just enormous latent demand for actual smart, high-quality stuff, and particularly in media and in every kind of media. And I think the issue is not lack of demand. I think the issue is lack of supply. Because this kind of goes back to kind of consumer marketing 101, which is people don't know what they want until it's given to them, right? Nobody ever asked for a Macintosh. Nobody ever asked for an iPhone. These things had to be designed and built, provided on the supply side before the demand materialized. And then the demand, of course, turned out to be, far higher than anybody expected. And I think that same thing is exactly true of media. I think a great early existence proof of this was the success of long form podcasting. which is, I remember my early conversations with some of the early long form podcasters, and they're like, it's the strangest thing we've ever seen, because everybody tells us that the consumers have short attention spans, but people are literally watching 3-hour podcasts, and we get the analytics, and people are watching all the way to the end of the 3-hour podcast. And so I view this very much as like, this is one of these classic markets that's a barbell, which is, you have a certain amount of whatever, just, mainstream, sort of mainstream, whatever, filler, whatever on the one side. But you have this massive sort of untapped market for high quality content in basically every domain. And they're just, and again, technological transformation. The existing structure of the media company was a structure that was designed for a world of centralized media. You need a new structure today, and of course that's why we're so high on Substack. But yeah, when we look at Substack, it's the exact same thing that you were just talking about with Databricks, which is like, wow, this thing could be orders of magnitude multiples larger, than anything we've seen so far. And frankly, I think we're starting to see that.
So implicit in kind of the fund sizes that you raise is some kind of view on how big the future is going to be, or how much of the world technology is going to eat over the next decade or so. What does 15 billion say about kind of what the world looks like in a decade, and how many Substacks there are that are much bigger than whoever they're replacing?
Well, I think that we reinvented the computer. And the new computer is far better than the one that we have been kind of building on for the last 50 or so years. Well, really longer than that, but 50 in earnest. And, so there is not, we talk about this all the time in the firm, there's not a problem that we can think of that you won't be able to solve with AI. So like almost every problem in the world, and from cancer to transportation to massive fraud in the US, you just name a problem in the headlines, and we're like, oh yeah, we can solve that. And so it's kind of the reinvention of everything. So like all our entire way of doing everything as humans, we think is going to change. And so, I would view it as 15 billion to start for us, because there's so much to do, and there's so many things that are going to get built. And, like some of it is just timing with the entrepreneurs, but we think the number of entrepreneurs is going to multiply as well, because the kind of the ease of going from an idea to a really fantastic solution and a fantastic product is just going to be so much simpler. Because, one of the things that AI is best at, of course, is kind of building stuff. And so, yeah, it's just at a very unique time in kind of the history of the world.
Yeah. The out-of-body experience I have with AI on a regular basis now is, it's like, okay, I think about the way Ben does, and then I'm like, all right, how might you apply AI to solve, for example, the fraud scandal, the kind of fraud that we're seeing play out, or anything like that. And it's like, oh, okay, well, I need to think about how to have AI solve this. And I'm like, well, wait a minute, why don't I ask the AI? Right. And then I go in there and I'm like, how should I do this? And it's like, oh, well, here it's obvious how you would do it. And here's, the 18 steps that you would take. And then I tell it, well, okay, like, interview me on all the open questions in the topic, to get my thoughts on them. And then it starts interrogating me. Right. And then I'm like, okay, now give me your point, and so anyway, it's just like, as like if you had tried to do that with a normal computer in the old days, it just like stare at you. Right. Like, so like, this is really, really, really different. And then, Packy, I think the venture lens I would put on this is, in terms of the mechanics of venture capital, the sort of classic, venture capital triangle is team, product, and market. And you're always trying to kind of evaluate all three of those. And people have always had, different theories over the years of which of those is more important than the others and how they interact. But the thing that basically every investor, public market investors, private investors, the thing that we're all trained to do is basically market sizing. Like we're trained to do technology analysis, we're trained to do background checks on people, and then we're trained to do market sizing. Like, okay, how big is this market? Because the classic adage, right, is if you put a huge amount of effort into going after a small market, you still get a small outcome. But there's a presumption in there, which is that you can actually predict market sizes on these things. And the problem with that, again, is this presumption that you can predict market sizes based on the dynamics that exist in the market today. But if there's a fundamental change on the supply side, if there's a fundamental breakthrough, a fundamental capability that doesn't exist yet, you're not going to be able to accurately model the market size because you can't see it yet. Like you've changed one of the major variables, and you can't do that. And, and then you could call that the leap of faith or whatever, but it's like, okay, if you make the change in the supply side, then all of a sudden the market gets 10 or 100 or 1,000 times larger. Like you can almost never validate that with math at the time of the investment, but that's the thing that makes the outperformers, really go. And I just think, like, as Ben and I kind of go through our careers, we just see more and more examples where the mistake that we or others make is, oh, this must be the market for Uber and Lyft must be the market for taxi cabs, right? Or the market, or the market for cloud software must be the same as the market for on-prem software, right? Or the market,
or the
by
market
the way,
for GPUs must be the market for people who like to play games.
Yes. Exactly. And we just keep seeing example after example after example where the significant enough technology change, product change on the supply side unlocks much larger markets. And I think that's going to be, frankly, that's going to be like the single dominant trend in investing for like the next 30 years. I think that's just going to like telescope way out.
The AI thing is so interesting, right? Because from a technology perspective, it feels like you can build products pretty immediately that are going to win. And then A16Z starts to make a lot more sense in that context, where it's like all of these other things. It's how do you do go-to-market? How do you do policy? Like, how do you set the conditions for the actual best technology to win as quickly as possible? Like, how do you think about all the different things that you do there? And is that the right way to think about it? That like the best technology should win and the platform is there to make sure that that happens?
The way we always thought about the firm was, what can a partner do for an entrepreneur that will not only help them ensure their success, but help them kind of build the company they want to build and the way they want to build it with the people they want to build it with, and the culture that they're proud of. And to do that, there's many, many pieces. And a lot of it, some of it is just like very fundamental, like, can you do your business in the United States of America? Can you do it in the world? And so that's where the policy comes in. It's just like a very basic question. And look, governments have a huge interest in technology these days. So like it's a necessary one. A lot of the other things come down to, how do you go from being an inventor to being a competent CEO? And that really is a confidence game, for lack of a better word, in that, it's very difficult to run an organization when you don't know what you're doing, which nobody does when they're an inventor. And you get tremendous amount of advice, and advice that's often extremely bad, and almost the opposite of what you should be doing. And there are very few, like the people who've actually built things don't have time to talk to you. They're often away building things. So you get these like advisors and, Silicon Valley people who tell you how to run your company, who to hire, this and that and the other. And then those things turn out to be wrong, and you get into this confidence spiral. And so the whole firm is built to put you in a kind of a virtuous confidence cycle as opposed to a vicious confidence cycle. And that means like, oh, I need to call somebody who's hard to get to, like an important CEO, or like, I've got to recruit a top-end engineer, or I have to figure out how to market my product, or I have to get to somebody important in the government. If I can do that, my confidence builds. If I can't do that, my confidence sinks. And so then, once you're confident, you can make decisions faster. You can, build the company more effectively. You can go for what you actually want. You can have confidence that, okay, what I want is the right thing, as opposed to what somebody's whispering in my ear, who is, whatever, a CEO coach or a VC or this or that or the other. And so the whole firm is designed to kind of enable that inventor to become a CEO and run their own company and put their mark, not just, locally, but in the world, by being able to kind of network to anyone. And so that's a lot of what we're about.
Yeah, and I just add the sort of macro, kind of outside in lens on that is it just like, we get to work with these, super geniuses, but they are super geniuses at building products, building technologies. To be a super genius at building technologies, generally it requires you to have been sitting in a lab and, in front of a screen for, 10 or 20 years. These folks are fully capable of understanding everything about the world at large. They just haven't done it yet. They just haven't been out then they haven't met all the people and they haven't dealt with all the issues in the real world. And so that leads to this kind of recurring, kind of, I would say, misimpression sometimes that the people have, which is like, well, if you build the right product, if you build the breakthrough, whatever XYZ widget, like it's just the world is obviously going to adopt it. Everybody's going to use it. It's just obviously going to, kind of suit things. And, and basically if it doesn't, the answer is the product's not good enough. And, there's a little bit of truth to that. Like obviously the more breakthrough the product, the more there will just be organic traction. But what virtually everybody finds, up to and including Elon Musk, right? What everybody finds is the real world is just like really, really big and really, really messy. Right. And there are, 8 billion people out there with like opinions that are not necessarily, your opinions. And, many of them have a real vote as to what is going to happen with your product and with your company, including whether anybody buys, your thing or, all of the X factors that kick in, all the different ways that, people are going to come and try to, cripple what you're doing. Or maybe even worse than that, just ignore you. Right. And so there is this really big world out there. It's really complicated. It's really messy. It's not necessarily in favor of new ideas. In many cases, it really, really doesn't like them and wants to reject them. And there's real art and science, to Ben's point, to building the company around the product and the founder, to be able to take the breakthrough and be able to take it successfully into the world. And as far as we can tell, like as far as I can tell, like that process is getting, hairier and more complicated over time. Right. It's not getting easier. It seems like it's actually getting significantly harder. And so, that's a big part of what the firm is built to do is really help founders work through that.
And one of the things that Marc said in the past, which is really true, is like, look, as an inventor, you're looking for power, like a power boost. So how do I go from little old me with my invention to like, I'm the important company in the space in the world. I can build momentum. I can get the best engineers. I can get the, customers faster. And that turns into a snowball and I'm rolling downhill. And so the whole firm is designed as like a very powerful entity that you can just tap into and, take our brand, take our connections, take our expertise and become extremely powerful very fast.
Yeah. And by the way, this is the solution to the puzzle that people have had about us for a long time, which is, wow, it seems like those guys are like, awfully promotional. They do all this marketing stuff. They're doing all this politics stuff. They must be doing this for ego reasons. They must be really full of themselves. This must be about,
talk so much shit.
They talk so much shit, like the whole thing. And at least, and maybe it's possible we talk too much shit. I'll let other people judge that from time to time. Maybe. However, from the beginning, the goal was to build the purpose of building the dominant venture brand was precisely to be able to have the companies be able to borrow that at the most critical points in their development, so that the companies can kind of use our force in the world as a slingshot to basically build their own force. And I think that's worked really well, and that's why we don't shrink back from a lot of these things.
Yeah, I wanted like just squeeze something in and then get right back on this conversation. Talking too much shit is so interesting, but I really love, I think the thing that impressed me the most when I started working with the crypto team was seeing Never take the negative in person and like never talk shit on a technology, never talk shit on a founder, never talk shit on a company. Like, how do you even train for that? Because that really, really impressed me.
Well, we train for that. We train for that. So we have a culture that is written culture that you cannot join the firm unless you sign a document, the culture document, that says you will adhere to this culture. And then you must sit through 1 hour with me understanding the culture. And fundamentally on that, our whole point is if you want to do something larger than yourself and make the world a better place, we are 100% for it. And we do not care. Like if in the moment we think you're making a mistake or like the idea isn't good enough, and it doesn't matter if we invest in you or don't invest in you, we're for that. We are dream builders. We're not dream killers. We're not here to be like the analytical smarty pants who makes ourselves look smart by making somebody else look stupid. And that's fundamental to how we think about the world. So like anybody who's trying to push the world forward and make it better, like whether we agree with their method or not, like we're for it. And so we just ask you to sign up to that idea before you ever join.
Catherine said that we believe in the future and bet the firm that way should actually be the number one kind of value in the culture doc.
By the way, that was Marc's. I did the wording, so I give myself a little credit, but that was Marc's idea.
Do you think that should be number one? Do you think that is number one in practice? Do you think first class business in a first class way is like, if you were to rewrite the doc today, what is the most important thing in the firm?
Well, look, I mean, the culture document is 7 things that, and the culture is more than that. Every culture is more than seven ideas and kind of 7 sets of behaviors. But those are the ones that all 7 of them that we really expect everybody to live to. So I don't know if I rank them in that sense, because they all go together. They're part of a single thing. So, we believe in the future means that we believe in the people who build the future, which means we're not going to criticize them, which means, we're not going to be on the attack side of that. We're never going to attack the future. We're going to try and make, there are going to be problems with how we build the future, but we're going to try and make it the best future we can. We're not going to try and live in the past. And so that you can't do that if you're attacking entrepreneurs all the time. You can't do that if you show up, an hour late to meet with somebody who's trying to build a company. You can't do those kinds of things. And so every part of the culture, I think, is in support of, we want to build a better future. Like that's why we're here.
Haber, in his piece, Firm Kind of Greater Than Fund, talks about, a firm as something that tries to build a compounding competitive advantage. And he points to one thing for Apollo, one thing for Goldman. If you had to pick a thing, what are you compounding? Like, what is the competitive advantage that you're building over time, do you think, here?
Reputation. Marc and I talked about that from the day we started the firm. And by the way, there were times when it was like, well, we're investing an awful lot in reputation. And, it's taken a while. But that's what we compete on. Like when we talk to an entrepreneur, and they're comparing us to another firm, we say, find an entrepreneur that's taken an investment from both firms, see what they say. Like, that's our answer to everything. We build reputation. Every relationship matters. Everybody who we touch, we try and touch as many people as we can, and we try and represent in the very, very best way possible to build reputation over time. And that compounds and compounds and compounds across entrepreneurs, across industries, across sectors, across, everybody from, people in the government to, people in companies that we don't invest in, anybody who is anywhere in the world of technology. We want them to know us, and we want them to think of us as the best firm to do business with.
Yeah, and then that transfers, of course, that transfers from us. That transfers to the portfolio companies, right? So which is the goal of it. Which is that then, as a consequence, when a company takes investment from us, now they're basically able to use our reputation to get themselves through those kind of key growth phases with potential customers and with recruits and with downstream investors and with regulators and with all these different forces in the external society. So the reputation pays off not just for us, but it pays off in the form of what our portfolio companies are able to do as a result.
So having done this for 16, 17 years, like, are there things about building and transferring reputation that you've learned that are not obvious? Because to me, like, it would almost seem that it's a battery. And if you give it to one company that messes it up, then the whole thing kind of falls apart. But actually, maybe it's like love to be like super cheap. Like, it just grows the more you give it. Are there other things like that you've learned?
Well, look, I do think that that's a correct insight in that, one mistake is much more powerful than, one good deed. So, one person being obnoxious, who's in the firm, or lying to an entrepreneur or doing something like that causes much more damage than you can do by doing that correctly, 5 or 10 times. Which is why you have to be so vigilant about it. Like you cannot tolerate that kind of behavior. But I think that the biggest thing that I've learned is it takes a long time to build a reputation. But once you do, it's the most powerful thing. It really does compound. And just to give you an example, look, when Marc and I raised Fund 1, it was a $300 million fund. I think it took about 6 months to raise. We had a lot of meetings. I can't count how many meetings. Some people did not treat us very well, as Trump might say. They didn't treat me well at all. Very badly. And, this raise, which was $15 billion, when we actually raised the fund, I think Marc did one AMA and I did one AMA. And I don't know that I took another meeting on this fundraise. And it was done on the reputation. And so that's a heck of a change, And look, a lot of, not that we talk to our investors all the time. I mean, I've been all around the world building relationships and so forth. But when we came to ask for money, it was raised entirely on the reputation.
I think, Packy, the external environment has changed, enormously. And so, we've lived this, as you have and many others, this incredible transformation where tech both is like much, much, much larger and more central now than it was in 2009 when we started, but also, the level of, let's just say, engagement on the part of the world tech is, the level of intensity on everything from, attacks, criticism, by the way, completely justifiable questions, impact on society, the intensity level is, I don't know, it's like it's like 1,000x of what it was 16 years ago. And so I think, I think to your question, I think we've really tried to kind of rise to that on both sides. Like we're really trying to help these companies get to levels of scale that nobody ever thought was possible before. But at the same time, we're trying to help them deal with pressures that previous generations of founders, generally didn't have to deal with.
Yeah. You seem like you uniquely, maybe of anybody that I know, have fun taking, engaging in these conversations. And I wrote about it a little bit in the piece, but like kind of stepping outside the situation and viewing it, I don't know, like what goes on in your head in these situations? Like, are you having as much fun as it looks like? Does it take a toll ever kind of like taking the arrows? What does it feel like in these?
Yeah, Ben, why don't you, Ben will give the rational response.
I would say it's, it gets emotional from time to time, right? Because you know what goes into building these things, and the intentions of the people building them, and like the kind of impact they have on the world, and then to just get like, and a lot of them the attacks tend to be in the form of character assassinations and so forth, and now everybody thinks Marc's Jewish. Just so they can attack him more. It turns out people love to attack Jewish people, so I welcome him into that.
My new name, Packy, is in certain political circles is Andy Andy Horowitz, because people think that people think and the swamp fringes of the internet, people think Andreessen Horowitz is a Jewish person.
Yeah,
and so I now introduce myself as. Yeah, I didn't have that in my Twitter bio. My real name is Andy Horowitz, but and I am Jewish, but I took it down.
Yeah, but I would say mostly it's just like it's an amazing. It's just like an amazing thing, an amazing privilege to kind of be in the center of it all, and look, and then the responsibility that goes with it, that you have to kind of try and help drive the world to the right answer. But like it's, I don't know if fun is the right word, but it's special. It's like we've gotten to a very special position, and I think both of us try and take it as seriously as we can. And look, things happen, and we have very, very long discussions about how we should react to certain things, how we should not react to certain things, what we can take a position on, what we shouldn't take a position on. And, just to be, at this stage of life, to be able to be talking about that as opposed to the things that we had to talk about when we were building Netscape or Opsware, like it's amazing. And I definitely wouldn't trade it. And look, we've been criticized so much at this point that like it bothers, interestingly, which I never thought I'd see, is it kind of bothers people inside the firm much more than it bothers Marc or me.
Sure. And I am, just for the record, studying for my bar mitzvah.
Yeah. Yeah. The Haftorah. You need to learn your Haftorah tropes.
Yeah. How do you avoid at this point becoming a big company? Like this is becoming a big organization. How do you avoid being a big company? Google wanted to avoid that. Like everyone wants to avoid that. How do you actually do that?
Yeah. So I think a lot of that is organizational design. I mean, so if you look at the companies that didn't feel like big companies for a long time, they had very, very, very thoughtful designs of the organization. And if you look at the firm, the crypto group or the infra group or the apps group or the American Dynamism group, they all feel like small companies. And they're small companies with a kind of very specific kind of support, in terms of the brand, in terms of fundraising and other kinds of things. But the fundraising team is a small group, and so every group is very autonomous from every other group. Like there's integration points, but they're very simple. And so for the most part, there's some that are more complicated than others. And so that's what makes it. The beauty of a small place is you can just get shit done. The beauty of a big place is you're very powerful. And so we try and kind of blend those two. We took a lot. Mark and I borrowed a lot. Early on, we really studied Hewlett-Packard, which the original Hewlett-Packard, before the computer business kind of swallowed the company, was very much like this. They were like a series of companies inside a company, and that's a lot how we are.
How do you vet GPs? Or it seems like you have to put a lot of trust in the people that are running the different teams. If the whole thing is reputation, but you need to be able to scale by having these kind of decentralized teams, is there anything that you do there that's unique or weird that ensures that kind of like no one group can infect the whole?
Well, I think, look, first of all, in order to lead one of those groups, you just have to have been here and performed for a long time. So that's kind of the first thing. So we just know you extremely well. We're not interviewing people for that job from the outside. Like, you can't get that job from the outside. And then, I would say, because our culture is so different than other venture firms, for better or worse, we're just different, that we don't hire a lot of outside GPs anymore. We generally try to hire people at an earlier stage of their career and kind of grow them into what we do. And that's worked much, much better for us, I would say, in general. Although we had, all of us came from the outside at one point of the original cast.
That makes sense. Kind of winding down here, but Mark, you said that I think you got shit at one point for saying the VC was going to be the last job in the world. If the vision of the future that you believe is true, and this is going to be an institution that lasts for a century, what does A16Z look like and do a century from now?
Right. Yeah. So I'll start with, I believe I was misquoted. I believe it was one of these hypothetical thought experiment things that kind of got overly extrapolated, but I guess I shouldn't just defend myself. So the point of what I was trying to get across in that discussion, which I think if you pull up the original, it's a longer form discussion on it. It goes back to what Ben said early on, which is there is this repeating pattern in history. I mean, we can find examples of it for sure going back 500 years. Is this repeating pattern, which is basically a person with a dream, a person with a deep level of domain knowledge and a dream. Operating in a domain with asymmetric payoff, right, with risk and reward, where, by the way, the dream may be wrong. Like they may not be able to do the thing. But if they can do the thing, it will have disproportionately high returns. The traditional institutional, places people go to get support and funding, for the dream, for new projects, just turn it down because, a bank can't finance, a bank can't issue a loan against something with a 50% chance of a 10x and 50% chance of failure. Like a bank just can't underwrite that. So a bank won't do that. Big companies, for the most part, won't do that. Almost nobody will do that. But somebody has a dream, and then when the dream works, and especially if you can construct a portfolio of those dreams and of those people, then the expected value on that is going to be very high. Like that's a very special thing. I've had long conversations with Tyler Cohen, who's particularly is very thoughtful in this, and he has a term. Forget the exact term they use. But it's like some combination of talent picker, project picker. And it's this thing, it's like we were talking about earlier about market size. It's this thing where there is an analytical scientific component to it, but there's also an art to it. And there's some intangible because you're dealing with human beings at a very kind of primordial level, kind of very early in the process of doing something that hasn't been done before. And, quite honestly, like, an early example of this was, Queen Isabella with Christopher Columbus, right? And I was just like, I always try to picture the pitch, right? Christopher Columbus rolls in, right? And he's like, all right, here's, I'm going to find a new route, route to India. By the way, there's like I don't know, whatever, 50, 60% chance that, you'll never hear from me again. And, maybe I've, died 2,000 miles away from Spain. Maybe by the way, maybe I just like ran away with the money. It's not like they had Interpol in those days.
Yeah.
And I'm going to go do that. And then by the way, the fact that bet paid off, but like that like it,
the whole idea was wrong.
Yeah. But the whole idea was wrong. The whole idea was wrong. He discovered a completely different continent, and he himself did not believe that he had discovered a completely different continent. Right. And I don't even know that Spain was the main beneficiary of that in the long run. Right. Like, and so like, but like, like she funded it and like, wow. Right.
Yeah.
And then there's a very similar gold. Yeah, exactly. Yes, they did find some gold. There's a very similar story, by the way. The Puritans have the Plymouth Rock, that whole thing, the Mayflower. They have a very similar story to that. It took, I think, 20 years to raise the financing to be able to make the Mayflower expedition, and they needed backers like that. We always talk now about in the venture industry, the whaling industry 400 years ago. It operated in a very similar way. The movie industry has always worked this way. The book publishing industry has always worked this way. By the way, politics has always worked. Political campaigns work this way. That any new future president starts out as a long shot. Somebody bets on them, and so there's this intangible that has to do with making these long dated bets with very uncertain outcomes and with high failure rates. And I mean, like I think what I said in the original interview is like, look, if we can have AI do that, like God bless, like I'm gonna hit the beach and like it's all good. But I guess maybe make the following claim and see Ben, what you think of this. The intangibles seem to be becoming more important, not less important over time. It seems to be becoming more like an art and less like a science as we go. Would you agree with that?
I definitely think that's right, because history is a bad guide. So you can't, like, the interesting thing about VC for me, probably the biggest lesson is you got to be very careful about a highly trained neural net, because that's when you make the mistakes, because things change. And I would say things have changed more rapidly. Like the thing that we never thought would ever go away is the mythical man month. 9 women can't have a baby in a month. Well, with AI, you can. With
the software.
Yes, it's software.
It's a metaphor for software.
It's a metaphor for software. Yes, exactly.
Yes.
Sorry. So in the old days, right, like no matter how many engineers you put on a team, you still, more engineers would actually slow down the project as opposed to speed it up. But now, so you couldn't throw money at a problem. You couldn't throw money at somebody's technological lead. You'd have to do something different. Now you can throw money at it. Elon did an amazing job of throwing money at the foundation model problem, and he caught up very, very fast. And that's something that in the whole history of our industry could never have happened before. So if you had asked an AI if Elon had any prayer of catching OpenAI or Anthropic, they would have said, no way. And so that's where you're getting into, maybe if the AI was smart enough, I suppose, but like there are these, a lot of it has to do with like, how much do you believe in the person?
Yeah. And then the other part is what we talked about already, but it's the long and twisting path. The investment's just the beginning, right? And it's the long and twisting path that person, that company take over time. And all the different ways that we try to help them succeed. And so I think that, I don't know how to have AI do all that, but maybe we'll figure it out.
Yeah, you could imagine an AI who could do it all, of course. If an AI was smarter than a human about every single thing, including human psychology, then certainly.
Could be.
You're tasked with training this AI. Like, what are the things that you've learned on this art that you can put into words? Like, if it is, and this is the most optimistic view of the future I can think of, the tools are getting better, but the human piece really, really matters. Like, what have you learned about the art that you can describe? Like, what do you look for in a Christopher Columbus?
Well, I think that the first thing, and I hesitate to name things in some sense because they're all so different, right? Like, Elon is really not at all like Mark Zuckerberg, who's not at all like Ali Ghodsi, who's not like at all like Brian Chesky. So like they're all different. But the things that they all do, I would say, is they all think for themselves. They're not people who read the room and try and like figure out what people want them to do. They have original ideas. So original idea is probably the thing that every great entrepreneur has, their original thinkers. And then, they all also have some combination of enough charisma. They're interesting enough that people want to follow them because, ultimately you kind of need people to go, okay, that is the leader and that's somebody who I want to work with, work for, and so forth. So those are the things that I would say almost all of them have. And I think all of them have those to be great. But everything else, like Steve Jobs is a very different kind of guy. They're all different, I would say. Very like Steve Jobs is nothing like Andy Grove, like nothing. But they're both great.
To close this out, I guess from each of you, what is the thing that you're personally most excited about in the next kind of couple of years of A16Z, but just tech more broadly?
Well, I mean, Mark had a great line like, well, this is on the order of like the steam engine or electricity, or like this is such a big invention that we're going to end up in a different world. And the thing that's most exciting to me about it is, I wouldn't want to live in the pre-electricity world. I like this world way, way, way better. And so I think that like odds are we're going to get to a world that's just way, way better than we can't even get our heads around it, which is why it freaks people out. Like all these stuff that we have to do and so forth that we've just learned to live with that sucks, isn't going to be required anymore. And so like, what does that mean? What do we think of then? Like, what does life become? It could be, super exciting. Now, the one thing with humans that's a little messed up is, if that takes us too far away, like one of the, too far away from some grounded purpose about, and beliefs and spirituality, then, you can attach on to some dumb stuff. So, that would be actually my only worry. But I think life, just the quality of life for everybody is about to get like way, way better than it's ever been.
I'm excited about the Zoomers. I am.
Yeah. All right.
I am psyched for the Zoomers. I was with a founder team the other day, and who were Zoomers, and I was explaining to them, why the Zoomers are so much better than the millennials and why they're going to save us, and like the whole thing is going to be great. This is so great. And of course, they're just like staring at me like I'm speaking Greek because like they did, they experience, they just think like millennials are like old farts that are like completely out of touch.
Yeah.
And of course, us Ben and I are Gen Xers, we might as well be Stone Age. And I was like, but I was like, this is what's so great about the Zoomers. Like they just like it's the post. I would describe it as 2015 to 2024 it was a very, very strange period. And a lot of just things got really weird. And the Zoomers are the generation that basically was on the receiving end of that. And they're at least for the Zoomers we get to deal with, like they're just not having it. And they're not walking around feeling guilty about everything all the time. They're not feeling like they have to like deny that they want to be successful. They don't have any of the moral, kind of hair shirt stuff. They're just like they're if anything,
by the way,
they
Gen
repelled
X
by it
was
all.
like that too. Gen X kind of let go of all the craziness of the 60s and early 70s.
Yeah, that's right. You're right. Exactly. Gen X was the reaction to the boomers in the same way the Zoomers are a reaction to the millennials. And so the Zoomer founders that we get to deal with, my view is like, it's the best, most competent, most capable. By the way, they're just like incredibly well, they come in all just incredibly well trained and educated because they grew up online. They've seen, 1,000 hours of YouTube videos from all the great, people in tech talking about how to do everything. They just know so much more than previous generations of founders did. And, they're by the way, they're all AI native. They all, basically learned AI from scratch and, in college, and, they're coming out and they totally understand it. And they're just like tremendously fired up and like completely, they wear their, they wear their heart on their sleeve. They're like, they're going to build something. They're going to build something great, and they're completely unapologetic about it. They're very forceful. They're very determined. I just think it's fantastic. I've been waiting this. Eric and Ben will tell you. I've been waiting for this for a long time.
We may have to edit this out, but one of the things I do really like about the Zoomers, I haven't ever heard anybody say anything like, I'm going to do well by doing good. Like
Exactly.
they never fucking say that bullshit.
No,
And they
none
have
of
a
that
good
stuff.
sense of humor too. They're funny.
Yes, yes, they're extremely funny. Well, they're extremely funny. They get it. They lived through. They were on the receiving end of just a tremendous amount of bullshit, and they're just not having it.
Yeah.
And so it's just, I find it just like tremendously exciting to be able to work with them. And if I had total control over my time, it would be 100% spent with Zoomers.
Well, I appreciate you spending an hour with a millennial. This was a ton of fun. Thank you for letting me write about A16Z, and thanks for the conversation.
We're talking about all your future guests.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Packy, this was an excellent piece. Thank you so much for writing it.
Yeah.
Good.
Amazing.
Yes.
My
Yeah.
pleasure.
100%.